so you don't want to get other people sick. Also, if you have open lesions on your hands or arms or other areas, if you have infected wounds, you want to keep them covered. But if they're really large wounds, you might want to consider not processing food until they heal, because the risk with that is Staph aureus, which is a pathogen that can contaminate food and cause other people to become ill. Good personal hygienes include bathing, wearing clean clothes, not wearing the shoes that you use out in the farm for activities in the field, and bringing those shoes into your home kitchen. There's a lot of pathogens that can come in on the sole of the shoe. And you just want to keep your processing environment, your kitchen, as clean as you can to maintain a safe environment for processing food. Hair restraints is another thing that you can do to pull your hair back so it doesn't get in the way and fall out into the food. It's important to remove unsecured jewelry and removing any hand jewelry that cannot be sanitized. So, if you have a wedding band on, it might be wise to take it off so you don't, especially if that band isn't a flat surface. If it has grooves, those grooves can be harbor sites for bacteria to sort of get stuck and grow. So it's important to take your jewelry off as well. You want to think about processing, and it's not just your home kitchen anymore. Now it's a processing environment for a food that you want to sell to make money. So it's really important to take these precautionary measures in your environment. So another thing that's really important is washing your hands. Hand washing should be conducted for about 20 seconds. You want to make sure you're thoroughly washing your hands. That means scrubbing in between your fingers, getting a strong lather on your hands for soap, and then rinsing with water and using a clean paper towel to dry your hands. Hand antiseptics are not a good replacement for hand washing. They don't clean your hands as well, especially if your hands are dirty. The antiseptics are diluted and it's not as effective at cleaning your hands. So you cannot do better than soap and water for washing your hands. If you have open wounds on your hands, you want to make sure you're covering them. If you're using Band-Aids, think about using Band-Aids that are a bright color or not food color. It's something that will stand out if it were to fall off of your hand. Another thing you might do is put a glove over the bandaged hand to make sure that the Band-Aid stays on and you don't have to worry about cross-contaminating the food. Some states don't allow bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods. The state I live in, which is Rhode Island, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. The state I live in, which is Rhode Island, does not allow bare hand contact with ready-to-eat foods. You have to use gloves or utensils. You just can't use your bare hands. So you might live in a state that has this regulation that you should be aware of. But if you're producing ready-to-eat foods, it's a really good idea to not use your bare hands and to use a utensil or a wax paper or some other means of touching the food without using your bare hands. Single-use gloves are really important for allowing you to handle food without using your bare hands. But there are some things that you need to consider. You want to use disposable gloves. In Rhode Island, we don't allow latex. Your state may not allow latex because some people have sensitivities or allergies to latex. So just know if that's a regulation in your state. Before you put the gloves on, you need to wash your hands so that once you touch those gloves, you're not touching them with dirty fingers. And then you want to make sure you change those gloves anytime you would wash your hands. One of the bigger complaints with single-use gloves is that people put them on and sort of forget that the gloves are there to protect the food from your hands, not your hands from getting dirty. And so you just need to be aware of when those gloves are dirty, changing them. Okay, personal hygiene. So when you wash your hands, like I said before, you want to wash them for 20 seconds with warm water and soap. You want to get a really good lather. I did a hand washing experiment at my daughter's school, and we had soap that came out of the dispenser as a foam. And by the time we used it, the foam had defoamed. So the soap wasn't really good at giving us a good lather. And then we sort of streaked our hands to see how much bacteria was on them. And we had a lot of bacteria on the hands of the kids. And I think, they didn't get a good lather when they were washing their hands. So I just want to emphasize, 20 seconds isn't a short hand wash. Really get a good lather in there and for washing your hands. It's important to do this before you start work, if you use the bathroom, in between any tasks where your hands might become contaminated, after you eat or drink, because your hands are going to your mouth. So you just don't want to be transferring any bacteria to the food you're processing. Anytime your hands become contaminated, you want to make sure you're washing them really well and dry them with a paper towel. Or if you're using a reusable paper cloth towel, just make sure it's clean. You can't, if you keep using it to dry your hands, it's going to become contaminated. So you want to make sure you're using a clean one every time. It's really important to think of your kitchen as this processing environment. And in doing so, you want to think about how you can separate your home foods from your business foods. This is important while you're processing, and it's also important while you're storing your food. Also, don't eat, chew gum, or smoke in the kitchen while you're processing food. Most states will allow you to drink water from an enclosed container. So you can have something around, but you again need to make sure that it's not going to become a source of contamination for the food processing environment. It's really important to prevent cross-contamination. Okay, good personal hygienes. All on-farm food processors should be knowledgeable of safe food handling practices and processes. So different states will allow for different foods to be made. For example, in Connecticut, they allow people to make acidified foods like pickles, but they are required to have education and training for doing this. However, Rhode Island doesn't allow for acidified foods to be made, so we don't have an education or training requirement. So just be aware that your state be aware of what your state allows you to make at home in your on-farm kitchen, and of any other additional requirements that they may have around that. It's really important that you understand the process of what you're making, what you're doing, whether it be baking or making a jam or jelly, and understand where potential problems can exist and how you can apply controls to keep the food safe. So if you're canning, baking, or cooking, what are the food safety controls associated with your product and process? For example, if you're baking, is the temperature you're baking to adequate enough to kill, say, salmonella, if that's, a pathogen of concern in your food product? If you're using eggs, that might be something you need to consider. So you need to think these things through with your process.